"Get out of my house, or I'll have you arrested." That was the first thing she said. No hello, no who are you? Just pure venom from a stranger standing on the porch of my childhood home, the place I hadn't seen in 10 years. It was a late morning in early spring, the kind where the air smells like damp soil and forgotten memories. My boots crunched on the gravel as I stood there, key in hand, the metal cool against my palm. 10 years away, and yet it still felt like home, until she appeared. The screen door banged open, and this woman, robe, messy bun, eyes burning with authority, stepped out like she owned the place. "You heard me," she snapped. "Leave before I call the police." Her voice echoed off the white siding my mom used to paint every summer. For a second, I thought it was some kind of mistake. Maybe she was a caretaker or a neighbor watching the house. But when she stepped closer, blocking the doorway like a guard dog, I realized this wasn't confusion. It was war. "Ma'am, I think there's been a misunderstanding," I said, trying to steady my voice. "This is my mother's house, Janet Miller. I'm her son. I have all the documents here." But she didn't care. She turned, stomped inside, and came back waving papers, thick, official-looking documents, stamped and highlighted. "Your mother owed me $57,000, she declared, "for round-the-clock caregiving. This house is mine now. She transferred it legally." Her confidence shook me more than her words. The way she said it, as if my mother's life, her home, her memories, were just items on a bill. I unfolded the envelope my mother's attorney had given me. The notarized will, the death certificate, the proof that everything belonged to me, but she barely looked. She just smiled, that kind of smile that says she's already decided who the villain is. "Your mother was confused near the end," she said softly, but her tone dripped poison. "I was her only real friend. You abandoned her for a decade." That one stung, because she wasn't entirely wrong. The guilt hit harder than her accusations ever could. 10 years in California, chasing promotions, working 80-hour weeks, telling myself I'd visit next month. But next month never came. Now I was standing in front of the home where I learned to ride a bike, and a stranger was calling me dangerous. When she pulled out her phone and dialed, her tone changed, suddenly calm, measured, almost rehearsed. "Officer Thompson," she said. "He's here, the dangerous son I warned you about. He's trying to break into my house right now." The way she emphasized dangerous and my house made my stomach twist. She wanted me to hear every word. And within minutes he arrived. A cruiser pulled up, lights flashing blue and red against the old oak tree out front. The man who stepped out was every inch the picture of authority. Crisp uniform, shining badge, the kind of posture that makes everyone else shrink a little. He looked at me like he'd already written his report. "Sir, step back," he ordered. "You're under arrest for trespassing and violation of a restraining order." "Restraining order?" My voice cracked. "What restraining order? This is my family's property." But no one was listening. Not him, not her, not the neighbors who'd come outside to watch. I saw phones raised, recording, whispering. One woman gasped, "Janet's son? Oh my God, he's a criminal." Martha, I didn't know her name then, but I'll never forget her face, stood on the porch clutching those fake papers like a queen with her decree. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she whispered, "Thank you, Officer Thompson. I told you he was dangerous." And the neighborhood believed her, because people always believe the uniform first. The fake officer recited Miranda rights with perfect rhythm, voice deep, calm, commanding. He even had the radio chatter, the body language, every movement precise. He pushed me toward the car as camera flashes from phones lit up my own driveway. I can still hear the sound of the cuffs, that cold click echoing louder than my heartbeat. That's the moment I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding, this was a setup. As he pushed me into the back seat, I caught a glimpse of an old man across the street, a neighbor I didn't recognize, phone to his ear. His expression was puzzled, not convinced. He was talking to 911, telling them something didn't feel right. That's when everything started to crumble. Because as Officer Thompson adjusted his radio, a familiar tune cut through the air, ba-da-ba-ba-ba, the McDonald's jingle. Loud, clear, coming straight from his supposed police radio. The neighborhood froze. Someone laughed nervously. Martha's hand flew to her mouth. The officer's face turned pale as he slammed the buttons, stammering, technical difficulties. But it was too late. The illusion cracked, the authority mask slipped. And in that moment, cuffed, humiliated, and surrounded by people who thought I was dangerous, I realized two horrifying truths. First, the cop wasn't real. Second, I had just stepped into something far bigger than one stolen house. Because people who fake power don't stop at one performance, they perfect it. And this act, this flawless imitation of authority, was only the opening scene of a much larger nightmare. Let me rewind. Because before I ended up in handcuffs on my own front lawn, this nightmare began with what I thought was the best decision of my life. 10 years ago, I left this small town for Silicon Valley, the land of glass offices and promises. A 6-figure salary, stock options, and a company car. It was everything people said you needed to make it. And maybe I did, but somewhere along the way, I lost sight of what actually mattered. I'd call my mom, Janet, maybe twice a year. She always sounded cheerful, too cheerful. "Don't worry about me, honey," she'd say. "I've got wonderful neighbors I'm taken care of." I believed her, because it was easier to believe than to face the truth that I'd been gone too long. Then 6 months ago, her attorney called. His voice was low, professional, like he'd said this too many times before. "Mr. Miller, I'm sorry to tell you, your mother passed away 3 weeks ago." 3 weeks. I'd been drinking overpriced coffee and arguing about project deadlines while my mother was gone. The drive home felt endless. Every mile was a punch of guilt. By the time I reached the neighborhood, the air itself felt heavier, like the town remembered me but not fondly. The house looked smaller. Mom's garden, once alive with color, was overgrown, wild, choking itself. Paint peeled from the mailbox she'd always kept perfect. I could almost hear her voice complaining, "That mailbox gives the first impression, Robbie." I stood there, key in hand, taking in the silence. It wasn't just quiet. It was empty, like something sacred had been stolen from the air. When I stepped onto the porch, the old wooden boards groaned under my boots. The air smelled faintly of chamomile, her favorite tea, and for a moment it almost felt like she was still there. Then the alarm shrieked. A sharp mechanical scream that shattered the stillness. Wrong code. I froze. I hadn't changed anything. Why would the alarm be different? I punched in the same numbers again, still wrong. The siren kept blaring as I scrambled to silence it. And that's when she appeared. Bathrobe, coffee mug, bare feet on the porch. The woman Martha with that furious expression like I'd kicked down her front door. "Get out of my house," she yelled, voice cracking with anger. I tried reason. "Ma'am, I think there's been a mistake." But she cut me off before I could even finish. "Mistake? You're trespassing. You have no right to be here." Her words carried the weight of someone who believed what she was saying, or had rehearsed it too well. When she shoved those papers at me, my stomach turned. A deed transfer, notarized and stamped, claiming she'd bought the house from my mother as payment for caregiving services. $57,000. I stared at the page, at the signature that looked almost like Mom's, but something about it felt off. "She would never sign this," I said. "She did," Martha insisted. "She was confused near the end. I was her only friend. You didn't care enough to be here." It wasn't just the words that hurt. It was how easily they could be true. I fumbled through my own papers, the will, the death certificate, everything legal and clear. "She left everything to me," I said, voice trembling. "Everything." But Martha only smiled, a cold, pitying smile. "You left her," she whispered, "and I didn't." Then she made that call. Calmly, slowly, like someone who'd done this before. "Yes, Officer Thompson, he's here. The dangerous son I warned you about." Dangerous, the word rang in my ears. Within 5 minutes, the fake cop arrived. Lights flashing, radio buzzing, badge gleaming, everything about him said authority. He didn't ask questions, didn't look at my documents. "Step away from the door," he commanded. "Sir, I said step away." He called me trespasser. He said restraining order. Words that carry weight even when they're lies. Martha stood behind him, wringing her hands, playing her part. "Thank God you came so quickly," she said, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "He's been threatening me all morning." And just like that, her performance became truth in their eyes. I kept trying to talk, but his voice drowned out mine. He said things in that practiced tone, Miranda rights, procedure talk, the whole show, every move rehearsed. When the real police finally showed up, yes, real police, the man didn't flinch. He smiled, calm, introducing himself as Community Liaison Officer Derek Thompson. The real officers nodded, stepped back, deferred to him like he was their superior. "Civil standby," one of them said. "Property disputes are court matters, we can't intervene." And just like that, they left. The imposter turned to me, lowering his voice so only I could hear. "Hope you enjoyed your family reunion," he said. "Because this property, about to become very profitable for the right people." The way he said profitable made my skin crawl. That night I sat in a cheap motel that smelled like bleach, staring at my mother's will under a flickering lamp. Every lawyer I called said the same thing. It's a civil issue. These things take months. Months I didn't have. Martha was already living in my mother's house, probably drinking from her favorite cup, while I was labeled a criminal. And then, out of desperation, I remembered Sam. We'd been college roommates, the kind of friend you promise to stay in touch with but never really do. Last I knew, he worked somewhere in law enforcement. Hands shaking, I dialed his number, praying he'd still pick up. When he answered, "Robert, man, it's been years." Something in me cracked. I told him everything, the fake cop, the forged deed, the humiliation. He didn't laugh, he didn't doubt. Instead, his voice dropped to a tone I hadn't heard before, calm, professional, dangerous. "Robert," he said, "you just stepped into something big. I work for the FBI now, and what you're describing sounds like organized elder fraud." The line went quiet. Then he said the words that changed everything. "Send me everything, photos, badge number, license plate. If your Officer Thompson is who I think he is, you're not just fighting for your mother's house. You're about to expose a criminal network." And in that motel room, surrounded by empty coffee cups and my mother's paperwork, I realized this wasn't just about reclaiming what was mine. It was about uncovering the darkness hiding behind a uniform, and the quiet evil that preys on people who still believe in authority. When I sent Sam the photos, the fake badge, the car, the paperwork Martha had waved like a weapon, I didn't expect his tone to change the way it did. The man I remembered from college, the one who used to fall asleep mid-pizza, suddenly sounded like an investigator briefing a team. "All right," he said, "give me a second to check this badge serial." I could hear him typing, fast, methodical, the faint hum of a computer in some federal office far away. Then there was silence. Long silence. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "Robert, you need to sit down." My stomach dropped. "That badge number," he said slowly, "was reported stolen from a federal evidence lockup 2 years ago. Your so-called Officer Thompson is using equipment stolen from the FBI." For a second, the words didn't even register. I'd been angry, humiliated, confused, but now I was scared. Because this wasn't just an HOA dispute or a greedy neighbor. This was federal-level crime. Sam kept digging. I could hear his mouse clicking, the soft buzz of urgency in his tone. Radio frequencies, uniform supply chains, vehicle markings, everything about this guy matches stolen federal gear. This isn't a coincidence, Robert. You've stumbled onto an organized elder fraud operation. The word operation hit hard. I wasn't up against one fake cop and a manipulative woman. I was facing a system. He explained it to me in pieces, like a detective unwrapping a horror story. These people target elderly homeowners, especially those with distant families. They create fake caregiving debts, intimidate relatives using fake officers, and then seize the homes under the guise of legal transfer. And they'd been doing it for years. Across 6 states. The air in that motel room felt heavy, like the walls were closing in with every new fact Sam uncovered. He showed me photos through a video call, mugshots, records, property maps. The same face over and over with different names. Officer Derek Thompson in one state. Detective Johnson in another. Sergeant Williams somewhere else. Same eyes, same smirk, same man. Sam leaned closer to his screen. His real name's Marcus Webb, career con artist. He's been impersonating law enforcement for almost a decade. My hands shook, and Martha... She's part of it, Sam said flatly. They always use a community insider, someone trusted by the neighborhood, especially the elderly. She plays the caregiver, gains sympathy, then hands off control to the fake cop when anyone questions her. It made sickening sense. The way Martha had said, I was her only friend. The way she called Officer Thompson like she had him on speed dial. The way everyone, even real police, deferred to him without hesitation. I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, realizing the ground beneath me wasn't solid. That's when I made my first real mistake. I got angry. I typed out an email to Martha, long, unfiltered, raw. All the guilt, all the grief, all the rage poured out in one message. I told her exactly what I thought of people who steal from the dead and manipulate the living. I hit send before I could think twice. Seconds later, Sam's face appeared on my screen, eyes wide. Tell me you didn't contact her. I did, she needed to hear it, I said. He sighed, the kind of sigh that comes from experience. Robert, these people are professionals. You just handed them a weapon. Right on cue, my phone buzzed. A new email from Martha. Thank you for confirming your threatening behavior in writing, it read. Officer Thompson will be filing additional harassment charges. I stared at the screen in disbelief. She'd turned my grief into evidence. Sam rubbed his forehead. They're building a narrative, Robert. They're not just stealing houses, they're framing the victims. This is what they do. Make the innocent look unstable so no one listens when the truth comes out. He turned his laptop around, showing me a federal database full of red flags, properties transferred to shell companies, identical documentation formats, forged signatures. Look at this pattern, he said. 17 cases, 6 counties, over $2 million in stolen property. I felt sick. Each name on that list represented a family, a son or daughter who thought they were visiting a parent, only to find out some official had taken everything. This isn't just about your mom, Sam said quietly. It's about an entire generation being hunted, and your guy Marcus, he's the predator leading the pack. He wasn't exaggerating. Sam opened a file full of mugshots, all Marcus. Different uniforms, different badges, but the same cold eyes. These are his aliases, Sam said. Derek Thompson, Officer Martinez, Detective Williams. Every time he gets too much attention, he changes names, moves states, and starts again. It was horrifying and genius in its evil. They built an empire on borrowed authority, feeding on people who believed in order, in uniforms, in trust. And they almost got away with it. But that night, as I sat in that motel room, something shifted inside me. The shame of leaving my mother alone all those years started turning into something sharper, something stronger. Rage with purpose. If they thought they could bury my mother's memory under fake paperwork and stolen badges, they were wrong. Because Janet Miller may have died quietly, but her son was about to make a lot of noise. Sam's voice brought me back. Robert, I'm going to need your help, he said. We can't go through local police, Marcus has them fooled, but if we can gather enough proof, I can get a federal warrant. Proof, I asked. Like what? He paused. Anything your mom might have left behind, notes, recordings, neighbors who saw something. And Robert, he leaned closer, his tone deadly serious. Don't let them know you're investigating. They think you're emotional, broken. That's your cover. I nodded, staring at my reflection in the motel mirror, eyes tired, face hollow, but alive with determination. For the first time in months, I knew exactly who I was and what I was about to do. They stole my mother's house. Now I was coming for theirs. By the next morning, I wasn't just angry, I was obsessed. The kind of obsession that keeps you awake through the night, scrolling through old emails, phone records, anything that might explain how this had happened. Sam and I were on a video call again. His background was different this time, an office lit by harsh fluorescent light, walls lined with case files. He looked focused, serious. "Robert, I've been digging deeper," he said, "and you're not alone." He shared his screen. A map appeared dotted with red pins clustered across several states. "Each one of these is a stolen home," he explained. "Different victims, same fake officer, same forged caregiver documents. Every single case connects back to a woman named Martha Perez and a man using one of Marcus Webb's fake identities." My stomach turned as I stared at the dots. Florida, Georgia, Arizona, all connected. "How many people?" I asked quietly. 17 confirmed, he said, "possibly more." He scrolled through the names, reading them aloud: elderly widows, retirees, single seniors living alone. Every story ended the same way. A sudden deed transfer, an official-looking officer, and a grieving family too afraid or too confused to fight back. I couldn't help but think of my mother, how she'd probably smiled at Martha, maybe even trusted her. The image made my chest tighten. "Robert," Sam said, "there's something else. I think they were operating right out of your neighborhood for years." He clicked again, zooming in on my old street, and I saw it. A cluster of incidents within a few blocks of my mother's house. He pointed to one name, Dorothy Patterson. "She's still alive," Sam said, "and she filed a complaint last year that went nowhere. Said a woman named Martha tried to convince her to sign a deed transfer for medical expenses." I recognized the name immediately. Mrs. Patterson lived 2 houses down from my mom, sweet old lady who used to bake cookies every Christmas. Sam called her right then. His tone softened. "Mrs. Patterson, my name is Agent Sam Rodriguez with the FBI. I'm investigating a property fraud case involving a woman named Martha Perez and a man calling himself Officer Thompson." There was a pause. When the elderly woman spoke, her voice trembled but held a quiet strength. "Oh, I remember them," she said. "That woman, she pretended to be my friend, brought me soup when my son was out of town. Then one day she showed up with papers and that officer said it was just for protection. But when my son asked questions, the officer said he could have him arrested for elder abuse." Her voice broke slightly. "He made my boy cry, told him he was a danger to me. I didn't know what to believe anymore." I felt something burn inside me, anger mixed with guilt. They hadn't just stolen homes, they'd torn families apart. Sam took notes as she continued. "He wore a badge, had the radio, knew all the words police say. He even called in fake dispatch codes. It all felt so real. If my neighbor hadn't called the sheriff, I might have signed everything over that night." That detail hit me. Someone had caught them mid-scam before. They'd been working this neighborhood like a hunting ground. When the call ended, Sam turned to me. "Your mom wasn't their first target. She might have been their biggest threat." That idea haunted me, because what if my mother had realized what they were doing and tried to stop them? Hours later, Sam called again, this time with panic in his voice. "Robert, they just filed an official harassment complaint using your email. They're trying to frame you." He sent me a copy. It looked terrifyingly real, stamped, formatted, signed by Officer Thompson. My words, the angry ones I'd written in grief, were quoted as threats. "They're creating a paper trail," Sam said. "If you step near that house again, they'll have cause to arrest you for violating a restraining order." They were building a fortress out of lies. That night I sat alone in the motel parking lot, staring at my reflection in the car window. I barely recognized the man looking back, tired eyes, hollow cheeks, but behind all that, a spark of defiance. My phone buzzed again, a text from Sam. "They're accelerating the sale. Closing set for Thursday morning, 36 hours. 36 hours before my mother's home. My inheritance was gone forever." Sam called one more time that night. "Listen carefully," he said. "Marcus Webb, the man pretending to be Officer Thompson, has active warrants in 3 states. When we take him down, it's going to be big, but we need him caught in the act, and for that we'll need witnesses." "Witnesses?" I asked. "You mean the neighbors who already think I'm crazy?" He gave a half smile. "Not all of them. Mrs. Patterson's on your side, and if she's willing to speak, others might follow. People just need to see what's really happening." As I hung up, I thought of the old neighborhood, the fences, the mailboxes, the faces that once smiled at me when I rode my bike as a kid. It used to feel safe there. Now it felt like enemy territory. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak from the hallway sounded like footsteps. Every car headlight flashing across the curtains made my heart race. By morning, I knew one thing for sure. If Marcus and Martha wanted to play their final act in front of an audience, I'd make sure the whole neighborhood was watching. Because if my mother couldn't expose them in life, then I'd finish what she started. And something told me that woman hadn't gone down without leaving a few secrets behind. The day I went back to my mother's neighborhood, the sun hung low, that kind of late afternoon orange that makes everything look like memory. I hadn't been back since the day the fake cop cuffed me. Every creak of the old front gate, every crunch of gravel under my boots carried ghosts of the past. I parked my truck 2 houses down and watched from the shadows. My old home looked different, colder. The curtains were drawn tight, the flowers replaced with fake ones, the porch freshly painted a color my mother would have hated. Martha's SUV sat in the driveway. Next to it a black sedan, the same one that Officer Thompson used. They were home. Sam's words echoed in my head. "We can't arrest them yet, Robert. We need evidence and witnesses. Record everything." So I did. I had a body cam clipped inside my jacket, a phone recording audio, and a small drone hovering high enough to avoid notice. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was bait. At 5:00 p.m., the HOA meeting started in the community hall at the end of the block. The perfect place for a show, the same faces who'd whispered about me, judged me, filmed me in handcuffs. They'd all be there. I walked through the door quietly. Heads turned, conversations froze, someone muttered, "Isn't that Janet's son?" Another whispered, "I thought he was banned." Martha was standing near the front, clipboard in hand, dressed neatly like she was running for office. Beside her, the fake cop, Marcus Webb, still in full uniform. Badge gleaming, posture perfect. The crowd's eyes followed him, respectful, trusting. When his gaze met mine, his smile didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Miller," he said smoothly, "you're trespassing again. I suggest you leave before we have another incident." I took a deep breath, forcing calm. "Funny," I said, "because I'd like to talk about that last incident, the one where you handcuffed me using a stolen badge." Gasps rippled through the room. Martha's face went pale. "That's a lie," she snapped. "You're a disturbed man harassing a grieving caregiver." I turned slowly, making eye contact with every neighbor, the people who'd known my mom for decades. "Do you all really think my mother would sign her home away for a fake debt? Do you even know who this man is?" Marcus stepped forward, hand on his belt. "That's enough," he said. "You're violating a restraining order." But this time I didn't back down. I looked straight at him and said, "You mean the restraining order filed under a stolen FBI badge number?" Murmurs spread. Someone whispered, "Wait, stolen badge." That's when I reached into my jacket slowly and pulled out a printed sheet Sam had sent me. "Here," I said, holding it up for everyone to see. "Federal report. Badge number 48,372 reported stolen from an evidence facility in 2022. The same number this man uses." Marcus froze, just a flicker, a tiny crack in his perfect performance. But I saw it. So did the crowd. Martha lunged forward, voice shaking. "He's lying. He forged that document. He's dangerous." I didn't even need to respond, because right then the door opened. And in walked Sam. He wasn't in a suit this time. He wore jeans and a jacket, looking like any other neighbor. But when he lifted his wallet and flashed his real badge, the entire room went silent. "Samuel Rodriguez," he said calmly. "Federal Bureau of Investigation. Everyone stay where you are." Marcus's face drained of color. "This is a mistake," he stammered. I'm a liaison officer." Sam didn't even blink. You're Marcus Webb, federal fugitive. You've been impersonating law enforcement for 7 years. The room exploded, gasps, shouts, people backing away. Martha started crying, but even her tears felt rehearsed. Sam nodded to the 2 plainclothes agents who'd followed him in. They moved fast, cuffs, Miranda rights, everything by the book. As they read Marcus's rights, I finally exhaled. 10 years of guilt, grief, and silence, all crashing down into one single breath of relief. Martha screamed, "You can't do this, you have no proof." Sam turned to her, voice calm but firm. "We have recorded calls, forged deeds, and 17 open cases with your name attached. You're done." For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the ceiling fan and the click of Marcus's handcuffs. Then Mrs. Patterson stood up from the back of the room. Her voice trembled, but it carried more truth than anything said that night. "I knew it," she said softly. "I knew you weren't real police." The room shifted. People looked ashamed, the same neighbors who'd believed every word Martha and Marcus had said. One man murmured, "We thought we were helping her. We thought she was protecting us." Sam looked at me. "You got your witnesses," he said quietly. "They'll all testify." I felt tears burning behind my eyes, not from sadness this time, but from the overwhelming weight of justice finally landing. When they led Marcus and Martha out, the crowd parted like the sea. I watched them go, their masks finally gone, their power crumbling in the daylight. Outside, the sky had turned that soft blue-gray before sunset. The air smelled of dust and rain, the same smell that always came right before a storm. Sam walked beside me toward my truck. "You did good," he said. "You could have let it go, most people would have, but you didn't." I nodded, staring at my mother's house down the street. The porch light flickered, weak but steady. "I just wish she could see it," I said quietly. Sam put a hand on my shoulder. "Maybe she already did." We stood there for a while, neither of us speaking, the wind rustling through the trees. And for the first time in years, I felt peace. But somewhere deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Because every time you expose one fraud, another hides in the shadows, waiting. And people like Marcus, they never work alone. The night after the arrest, the whole neighborhood felt different. You could feel it in the air, that strange quiet that follows a storm. The porch lights that once glared with suspicion now glowed softer, like they were ashamed of what they'd seen. I stood outside my mother's house for the first time in months, holding the key she'd left me. The one I hadn't used since the day Martha screamed for her fake cop to take me away. It fit perfectly into the lock, as if the house itself had been waiting for me to come home. The door creaked open, and a faint scent of lavender drifted out, my mother's favorite. It hit me hard. I stepped inside, boots leaving small prints on the dusty hardwood floor. The place felt both familiar and foreign, like time had kept moving but the memories had stayed. The furniture was gone, replaced by cheap chairs and sterile decor, Martha's doing. But beneath it, I could still feel the heartbeat of my mother's world. The worn spot on the carpet where she used to sit by the window with her tea. The faint outline on the wall where our family photo once hung. Sam had been right. Justice wasn't the end, it was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, everything became a blur of court hearings, property filings, and depositions. Martha and Marcus were officially charged with fraud, identity theft, elder exploitation, and impersonating federal officers. But the more the FBI uncovered, the worse it got. It turned out that Marcus wasn't just running small scams. He was part of a national network, a fake property management ring that specialized in targeting elderly homeowners. They'd use HOA boards, neighborhood watch groups, even fake caregiving agencies as fronts. Sam called me one afternoon. His tone was weary, the kind of tired that comes from staring into darkness for too long. "Robert," he said, "we found records linking Marcus's group to over 40 shell companies. They've laundered millions. And some of those transfers went to real estate developers, ones that sponsor actual HOA projects." I sat in silence, gripping the phone tighter. "So this goes higher than them?" "Much higher," he said. "Your mom's house was one of the last properties they needed to complete a development package. Once she passed, they saw an easy grab, but when you came back, you complicated things, so they created a story to get rid of you. That hit hard, because all along I thought I'd just been fighting a greedy neighbor, but I'd been standing in the way of an entire machine. The media caught on fast. Local papers ran headlines like "Fake Cop Scam Exposed in Quiet Suburb" and "Elder Fraud Ring Busted, Dozens of Victims Found." For weeks, reporters camped outside, hoping for a quote, but I didn't talk. Because for me, this wasn't about news or fame. It was about my mother. One evening, I walked the backyard, her garden overgrown but still alive. I knelt by the rose bush she planted when I was 10. The thorns had grown wild, twisting through the fence, but a few bright red petals had survived. I brushed the dirt from the old stone at its base, the one she'd carved herself. "Home is where you are loved." I whispered, "I'm sorry it took me so long, Mom." The wind moved softly through the trees, almost like an answer. The community changed after that. Neighbors who once avoided me started knocking on my door. Mrs. Patterson came by with a tray of cookies and trembling hands. "Your mother was a good woman," she said. "I should have said something sooner." I smiled weakly. "You did now." The HOA board disbanded within a month. Turns out, Marcus had helped form it years ago, another way to control the neighborhood and access private records. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The organization, built to protect property values, had nearly destroyed the very people it claimed to represent. Sam visited often. The investigation was still ongoing, names being added to the case, more victims stepping forward. "You wouldn't believe how deep this goes," he told me. "There's an entire black market for identity documents tied to homeownership. The system's broken." I looked around the living room at the empty space that still held my mother's spirit. "Then let's fix it," I said. He smiled faintly. "You sound like her." That night, I sat at the old desk near the window and wrote in her notebook, the one I'd found tucked under a drawer. It wasn't much, just short entries and little reminders in her neat handwriting. But one line stood out, written months before she passed. "If anyone ever tries to take this home, remind them, love built it, not money." I closed the notebook, tears blurring the ink. Sam later told me that one of the federal agents on his team had found dozens of similar notebooks in other victims' homes. People who'd sensed something was wrong, but never had the strength to fight. My mother's words became part of the case, read aloud in court as evidence of awareness, defiance, and dignity. The judge restored ownership of the property to me within a month. When the verdict was announced, I didn't cheer. I didn't even move. I just sat there quietly, feeling the weight of the moment. Because justice doesn't bring people back, it just gives their story meaning. That night, as I locked up and stood on the porch, I noticed something new. The neighbors had left small candles at their doorsteps, flickering lights stretching down the street. Mrs. Patterson said it was their way of honoring my mom, for standing up even when no one believed her. For the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. But deep down, I also knew this wasn't over. Because in every HOA, every gated community, every quiet suburban street, there's someone else being bullied, manipulated, silenced. And maybe that's what this whole thing was about. Not just fighting for one house, but for everyone who ever felt powerless against the system that was supposed to protect them. I took a deep breath, looking out over the dark horizon. The porch light flickered once, then steadied. "Rest easy, Mom," I whispered. "You're home safe now." But in the stillness of that night, one truth settled deep in my chest, the kind that never leaves you. Justice doesn't end with an arrest. It begins when people stop being afraid to tell the truth. It started with a letter. A plain white envelope slid under my door one morning. No return address, just my name, written in neat, unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a single sentence. "You should have stayed quiet, Robert." No signature, no clue, just that. I read it twice, then a third time, trying to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe some angry neighbor upset about all the FBI cars and reporters. But deep down, I knew better. Because silence isn't a threat unless someone's afraid of what you're saying. The next few days were strange. I'd notice cars idling longer near my driveway, lights flickering at odd hours. Once I found my mailbox pried open, the latch bent like someone had forced it. When I told Sam, his voice grew tense. "You're still dealing with a network, Robert. Marcus and Martha might be in custody, but their associates are. You rattled a very expensive operation." That was when I realized this wasn't over. The people behind this scam weren't just criminals. They were businessmen with power, money, and connections buried deep in the housing system. Still, I couldn't back down. Not after what they'd done to my mother, to all those families. So instead of hiding, I went public. I agreed to a TV interview, something I swore I'd never do. Sitting under those bright studio lights, I told the whole story, how fake HOA officials and fake cops had terrorized elderly homeowners across multiple states. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't need to. The truth was dramatic enough. When the segment aired, everything changed. The story went viral. Reporters called it the HOA scam that fooled America. Families began reaching out, people from all over the country. Sons, daughters, grandkids who'd lost homes under caregiving debts or property disputes that suddenly looked very familiar. Within a week, I had hundreds of messages in my inbox. Some were heartbreaking, like the woman in Texas whose father lost his ranch to a similar scheme. Others were angry, demanding justice. But a few were scared. They'd seen men watching their houses, cars parked outside for hours. That's when I knew the network was still active. Sam confirmed it. He'd traced new fake HOA filings popping up under different company names. "They're reorganizing," he said. "Changing states, changing tactics, but it's the same playbook." He paused, then added, "They've noticed you're becoming a problem." I laughed bitterly. Good, maybe that means I'm finally doing something right. But it wasn't long before the threats escalated. One night, I was sitting at the desk where my mother used to write her grocery lists when I heard tires screech outside. A rock shattered the front window, glass raining across the floor. I ducked instinctively. When I looked up, there was another note tied around the rock. "You want justice, we want silence." The police came, but by the time they arrived, the street was empty. No witnesses, no cameras, nothing but the echo of a car engine disappearing down the road. Sam had agents put a surveillance car nearby after that. But fear was what kept me awake. It was anger, that cold, focused kind of anger that makes you stop being afraid. So I did something risky. I organized a meeting, not with lawyers or journalists, but with the victims themselves. We gathered at the same community hall where Marcus was arrested. This time, it was packed rows of people who'd all been manipulated, threatened, and silenced. Some were old, some young, but all carried the same haunted look of disbelief that I'd once worn. I stood at the front, palms sweaty, heart pounding. "My name's Robert Miller," I said, voice echoing through the room. "I lost my mother to these scams, but I also got her justice because I stopped being quiet, and now I want all of you to do the same." There was a long silence. Then someone stood up, an elderly man with shaky hands clutching a worn cap. "They took my brother's home," he said softly. "Told him it was overdue taxes. He died thinking it was his fault." His voice cracked, but the room stayed silent, listening, absorbing. Then another voice joined in, a woman from Nevada. "They forged my mom's signature, too." And another. "They said I'd go to jail if I didn't pay the HOA restoration fee." One by one, people started sharing. Stories that sounded different on the surface but identical underneath. Lies, authority, fear, silence. By the end of the night, we'd formed something new, not an HOA, not a committee, but a movement. We called it the Home Truth Project. A network of victims and families willing to speak out, share evidence, and testify publicly. Sam warned me, "You're painting a target on your back." "Maybe," I said, "but if no one speaks, they win again." He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, then we do this smart. Quietly, I'll connect you with a few trusted agents. But Robert," his voice lowered, "watch who you trust. Some of these people still have friends in local law enforcement." That chilled me more than the threats. The idea that corruption could hide behind real badges just like fake ones. Still, I kept going, because for the first time since my mom passed, I had purpose. The following weeks were a whirlwind. Interviews, depositions, testimonies, more arrests followed. Entire fake HOA boards were dismantled. The FBI's report called it one of the largest property fraud rings in U.S. history. And through it all, that fear I once felt began turning into something else: resolve. Late one night, after another long day of calls and statements, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, staring at the horizon. The cicadas hummed in the distance, and for a fleeting moment I swore I could feel my mother's presence, quiet, calm, proud. That's when Sam called. His voice was tight. "Robert, we found something." I straightened up. "What kind of something?" He hesitated. "A financial record. It leads to a holding company in Washington, one that funded multiple HOAs, including yours." I frowned. "You're saying this goes all the way up to developers," he said, "and lobbyists, people who write the very laws that let these HOAs exist." The line went quiet. Neither of us spoke for a while. Finally, I whispered, "Then we're not done yet. Because the truth about power is simple. The higher you climb, the darker it gets." And I wasn't afraid of the dark anymore. The call from Sam that night felt like a final door unlocking, one that led straight into the heart of something I'd only glimpsed before. Developers, lobbyists, real estate executives with spotless suits and dirtier secrets. The kind of people who never touch a lie directly, but build entire empires on top of them. He sent me a file, encrypted, confidential. Inside were documents linking Marcus Webb's shell companies to a massive property development firm called Arden Communities, headquartered in Washington. On paper, they specialized in revitalizing struggling neighborhoods. In reality, they were buying up homes stolen through fraud and flipping them for millions. And my mother's home, it was on their list. Sam's voice came through the line, calm but heavy. "Robert, this is bigger than either of us. You're about to walk into a storm, the kind that ruins people or changes everything." I stared at my mother's garden through the kitchen window, moonlight falling over the roses she'd planted decades ago. "Then let it ruin me," I said quietly, "but it won't ruin her memory." The next morning I drove to the city. The Arden Communities building was sleek, glass-fronted, a temple to money. Inside, everything smelled like coffee and power, marble floors, fake smiles, and the hum of air conditioning that felt colder than ice. At the front desk, I asked to speak with their legal director. The receptionist smiled too easily. "Do you have an appointment?" "Tell him it's about one of his properties, Janet Miller's house," I said. Her expression changed, just slightly, but I caught it. 10 minutes later, I was escorted to a conference room. A man in a tailored suit walked in mid-50s, expensive watch, polite smile sharpened by arrogance. "Mr. Miller, I hear you've been making quite the stir," he said. "We sympathize with your loss, but any property disputes should be handled in court, not the media." I looked at him unblinking. "You knew," I said. "You bought homes from a fraud ring, you funded it." He chuckled softly, like a man humoring a child. "Mr. Miller, property transfers happen through legitimate channels. If someone forged documents, that's tragic, but it's not our concern. We follow procedure." There it was, the perfect defense procedure. Evil wrapped in paperwork. I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table. The red recording light blinked softly. "You've been using shell LLCs," I said, "registered under names that match the same corporations tied to Marcus Webb. I have copies of the transfers, timestamps, even the notaries. You profited from stolen homes." He didn't flinch, not at first, but his eyes narrowed. "Be careful, Mr. Miller," he said quietly. "Allegations like that can ruin reputations." "Good," I said. "Yours deserves it." The air between us thickened. Then, just as he started to respond, the door opened, and Sam walked in with 2 federal agents behind him. The man's smirk vanished. "Actually," Sam said, sliding a file across the table, "it's already ruined. We have enough evidence for conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, and racketeering. You're under investigation." The man stood slowly, his composure cracking. "You can't prove." Sam interrupted him with the calm authority of someone who'd seen too much. "We can, and we will." They led him out in silence. The sound of his expensive shoes echoing down the marble hallway felt poetic. Every step was justice, slow, deliberate, unstoppable. When it was over, Sam and I stepped outside. The city air was sharp, and for a moment neither of us spoke. Cars passed, people hurried by, completely unaware that a small piece of corruption had just collapsed behind those glass walls. Sam turned to me. "You know, you didn't have to come this far," he said. I smiled faintly. "Yeah, but my mom always said, if something's worth fighting for, fight all the way." He nodded, she'd be proud. That evening I drove home. The sun was setting, painting the sky in gold and crimson, the same colors that used to spill through my mother's kitchen window every evening while she cooked. I parked in the driveway, walked up to the porch, and sat on the old swing she loved. The chains squeaked, the wood creaked, and for the first time in years it didn't sound lonely. The house was mine again, legally, officially, spiritually. But it wasn't just about the deed anymore. It was about what it meant. Home wasn't four walls or a title. It was a promise, one I'd broken once but finally kept. The neighborhood was different now. The old HOA board was gone, replaced by a small volunteer group that actually listened. Mrs. Patterson's roses had bloomed again, and kids were playing in yards that had been quiet for too long. Healing had a sound, laughter, conversation, forgiveness. That night, the community gathered for a small memorial under the old oak tree in my mom's front yard. Candles lined the driveway, their flames swaying gently in the breeze. People shared stories, not about fraud or betrayal, but about kindness. My mother's kindness. When it was my turn to speak, I looked around at all those faces, the same ones that had once looked at me with suspicion. And I said, "My mom used to tell me that justice isn't loud. It doesn't always come with sirens or headlines. Sometimes it's just a person standing their ground, quietly, stubbornly, until the truth shows up." The crowd was silent, listening. I smiled. She taught me that love is louder than lies, and she was right. After everyone left, I stayed by the tree. The night air was cool, the stars sharp and bright. I could almost hear her voice, soft, patient, proud. As I walked back to the porch, I saw a small flicker of light through the window, the old digital clock in her living room still working after all these years. 10 p.m. That was always her favorite time. She used to say it looked like the clock was smiling. I sat down, took a deep breath, and whispered into the quiet, "We did it, Mom." The porch light glowed steady, warm, unwavering. And that's when it hit me, this wasn't just my story. It was everyone's story who's ever been silenced, doubted, or told to walk away from what's right. Because sometimes, the strongest thing you can do isn't fight back with anger. It stands still and let the truth speak louder than the lies. Justice found its way home. You've heard this confession, now wait until you hear the next one. The truth that shatters everything you thought you knew.